This is just a quick book placement, product placement for my books under the author name Derek Hemingway. First, we have the first installment in the Human Saga, which is my epic trilogy of novellas about a future civilization of corporate fascism that is being invaded by an alien cult. We have The Mortician's Daughter, a dark fantasy set in Mesoamerica about a sorceress who blocks out the sun to create a kingdom of darkness and evil, full of ghosts and monsters. It's fucking awesome. Part 2 of the Human Saga, and then part 3. There's currently my first full-length novel in the works, so be on the lookout for that. That's about all. That heathen bastard! Hello, everyone. Welcome back to That Heathen Bastard. Remember, this is not a news show. This is a platform for talking points, which may eventually evolve into a podcast. That idea is on simmer. If you want news, I recommend Tim Pool and Styx Hexenhammer. With that being said, welcome to the show. And today I'm going to cover a topic that, I know some people get a little pissy with me when I talk about this. The race issue! Woo! That's just sort of a little commentary for some people's attitudes, especially on BitChute. If you are a fucking racist bastard in my comments on BitChute, you will be dealt with. And if you get openly hateful, you will be blocked. I'm serious. I will not put up with anything from any of you folks. Never been put up with anybody like that before. Never fucking will. With that being said, I'm going to cover this. And I don't care what any of you have to say. This is the truth as far as I'm concerned, based on facts, figures, and a little bit of passion. Now, I'm sure we've all heard of Sun Tzu at this point, right? We've all heard of Sun Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher / military general. Was a military philosopher, and his ideas on armies and troops and advancements have been around for hundreds of years, and they've proven themselves to be successful. They're not just relevant to military life, they're also relevant to life in general. Now, I wanted to mention how the mainstream media looks very much like state propaganda, right? It bears close resemblance to the state propaganda that is out there in the world. Because oftentimes the government will say a thing and then it will be very much echoed by the mainstream media. For example, they will say something about January 6th as for an example, and then in the mainstream media it will be echoed almost perfectly. This is just one of the possible signs that it's state propaganda. Also, at the same time, remember how hard the Democrats fought Donald Trump? And then remember how the mainstream media just went after him like gangbusters. They just could not leave the man alone. Right? He was public enemy number one. He was pure evil, blah, blah, blah. And the mainstream media did not just echo that from the government. They echoed it in almost every possible way. They echoed it in casual conversation. They echoed it behind the scenes. He was the most hated man in the media. And the Democrats hated them too. And don't kid yourself thinking Fox is somehow not propaganda for its preferred party. It most certainly is. Trust me, if Fox and conservatism were more popular and the roles were reversed, they would be no less propagandistic. Quite on the contrary, they'd be just as bad, if not worse. Now, of course, this is a superficial look at how it resembles state propaganda. But I'm saying, if it was state propaganda, then that is something we would expect to see. We would expect to see a kind of echoing of the state narrative. And that is what we are seeing. Now, of course, there's also the truth that the state, that is the government, is courting the far left. What I mean by this is whenever the far left puts an idea out there, they tend to court the left on it and say, oh, we like that idea. We like you. Let's support you. Right? For example, the far left puts out the idea that, oh, there's racism and white supremacy everywhere, right? Everything is secretly racist and they just have to expose it. And then the government, not long after, is like, oh, we like that idea. We think you're right. And they begin courting it. And note how many politicians give soft support to Antifa. The mayor of Portland, Lori Lightfoot. Lori Lightfoot gives soft support to both Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, by the way, recently had a dude literally make an attempted assassination of a Democrat politician. Like, this is how extreme these people are. So the fact that the government would appear to be courting them is disturbing. It is very disturbing. Now, mind you, this is superficial, and I have yet to go deep on this, but it looks bad, which is why I mentioned to bring it up, because it is part of the greater picture here. Because if the state is courting the far left, and if the state is diving deep on the race issue in a toxic way, then that definitely plays into the topic. That being said, the courting of the far left, I think, is largely because of social media. Social media has changed the world in that it gives everyone a strong voice, including the fringe minority, the weirdos, the creeps, the freaks, and so forth. I want to, of course, relate it to the concept of what happened with professional wrestling when social media became more of a thing, right? Professional wrestling was built around this idea of kayfabe, that you had stories and characters and it was all fake and almost vaguely soap opera-ish, right? Well, that was much more difficult to maintain when social media became a thing. When social media came around, that created a greater level of connectivity than ever before. And because of the amplification of certain voices, you have these people called smart marks, right? Who sort of became an amplified voice promoting indie wrestling, and that ruined, that is the independent scene, sort of ruined the mainstream scene of professional wrestling. It kind of ruined it. They became WWE became Ring of Honor, but bad. And my point being is that the far left and even the far right, to some extent, are like the smart marks of politics. They're actually an insane, deranged minority that have simply been amplified by the nature of social media, and because of how loud they have the illusion of being a majority when they're actually a minority. And they've sort of fallen for that trap because they don't really know how to analyze or understand social media. They have no analytics, they have no social media expertise. They're old boomers or post boomers or even greatest generation. There is such a thing as neuroelasticity. Once you get past a certain age, it gets harder for you to accept and understand new concepts. So that makes the fringe minority on the left and the right become amplified. The far left being sort of the popular ones to use as the go-to, and then the far right as a kind of boogeyman, just to scare you into giving them what they want. Right? To relate it to, say, the Star Wars prequels, we will say that the far left is the Republic clone army and the far right is the Separatists. The Separatists are just a boogeyman so that they'll give emergency powers to Palpatine. In that scenario, Biden is our Palpatine and the boogeyman is QAnon or some other, or the Proud Boys or some other far right group or vaguely far right group, with the left wing being the one that's being sort of treated as the clone army, the solution to the problem. BLM, Antifa, SJWs, you name it. They're the answer to the problem. Which is a hilarious idea when you realize that the left wing is actually pretty fucking racist. There's been statistical analysis showing that left wingers dumb down their vocabulary when they're speaking to racial minorities. They dumb down their speech. Why would you do that if you didn't think that the person was dumber than you and therefore you need to speak on, quote unquote, their level? Generally speaking, if you really analyze the logic of what the left does and what the left says, if you ignore the words themselves and focus on the overall logic behind them or the perceived logic, they appear to believe that races are inherently a thing, being that they have an inherent attribute. White evil, black, helpless, Mexican, innocent, uh, Asian, now white adjacent, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. I think that they seem to think that Asians are somehow privileged in their own capacity. Right? They purport this perpetual victim narrative. They actually drag people down. Slavery never really ended. They just changed what kind of chains they used to restrain the slave. Black liberals are enslaved, and the white liberals are the slave owners. And the chains are the victim mentality. They think races have inherent attributes, which is, by the way, a classic trait of racism. The Nazis thought that way. The KKK thought that way. That is a classic trait of racist ideology. Races are inherently a particular way. Psychologically, there are certain scientific facts like melanin and eye fold and nose shape and relative shape of various facial appendages, but none of these factors really affect level of intelligence or personal success in any demonstrable sense, in spite of how some might try and claim. The sort of race realists who suggest that blacks are inherently lower IQ, which is nonsense. Right? A lot of the time, the lower IQ, I really think, has to do with just the fact that many countries in Africa are communist. And communism cannot afford good education because of the failure of their economic policies. And so I would argue that a lack of education, proper education, creates lower IQs. IQs may reach a height because of education. Like maybe there's a maximum potential, there's a capacity, but then there you have to rise to fill that capacity. I'm thinking that's probably how it works in some sense. Mind you, IQs were invented by a math teacher from France and just became a popular idea that kind of grew from there. That being said, it is not a natural thing that exists. It may very well just be a human construction in the first place. IQs may not exist. Possibly. There might be something that actually exists that it correlates to. But that is, generally speaking, the racism of the left wing. They tend to think of everyone in specific categories as white evil, black victim, native victim, Mexican innocent, et cetera, Asian white adjacent, et cetera. That is how they operate. That is how they talk. You catch them on social media saying this shit all the fucking time. And if you're like me, and you've experienced any kind of racial verbal abuse, and you try to talk about it in any open capacity, they will try to downplay it because you're not within the realm of victim status. You're white, and therefore you don't matter. You're supposedly immune to racism because racism comes from you, not to you, according to their ideological theory. That you are just inherently bad, so you can't ever be the victim. Never mind the fact that someone starts shouting horrible things at you in a comment section, trying to break you. Never mind that. You have to have the right skin color for anybody to give a shit. And as a side note, one of these days I feel like I'm just going to transmogrify to a bear and just chew these people's faces off. They make me fucking angry as hell. This is the part where people get on my case, but this is the truth, is that, generally speaking, white people are sometimes mistreated, either physically or verbally. As I mentioned before, there were 666 reported hate crimes to the FBI against white people, and the participation was overwhelmingly black. 6 of those were racially motivated rapes. Most of them were aggravated assault or use of intimidation. Use of intimidation or physical violence. Real forms of abuse. But these leftists like to downplay it whenever they hear about it. It's almost like they think it's somehow harmful to their narrative. And that's because it is, because their narrative is not fact-based. These people are cultural throwbacks. Because for most of human history, people were driven by feelings, and then narrative. It got dim outside. I'm constantly adjusting my light level. But for most of human history, people were motivated by feelings and then narrative, right? It's only when an Enlightenment era rationalism came into existence that it became facts and logic. That's a more modern manifestation. And what we see is that if we raise a child in the emotion and narrative context, they become superstitious, hyper passionate, excessively influenced by perceived authority figures. But if you raise a child in a facts and logic context, they question more, they learn more, they're far less likely to believe in any silly superstitions or nonsense, and they're far more likely to follow the facts to get the truth and have a more scientific attitude about the world. Right? These people are a throwback to the old way of emotion and narrative. A preferred narrative and feelings are the driving of the left. And so, because their narrative is not fact based, of course, reality is a danger or a threat to their ideology, which is why their ideology needs to be changed and done away with, because it's actually leading them astray. And as to the idea of how I and some others have been treated, do I see myself as a victim? Absolutely not. Do I see myself as someone who has been harmed in some way? Absolutely. And do I seek some kind of recompense or accountability? You damn right. At the end of the day, though, recovering from this has been my responsibility. And getting justice for this has been my responsibility. We must accept responsibility, not cast blame. But at the same time, accountability for immoral action must always be demanded. Immorality cannot be accepted in any capacity. Left-wing immorality cannot be accepted. Racist immorality cannot be accepted. And in the end, we all just need to either learn to treat each other right or leave each other the hell alone. If you can't get along with someone, then get the fuck away from them. Period. If you feel you can't get along with white people, get away from them. And if you can't feel like you can't with anyone who's black, do the same. Get the fuck away from them. That's how it should be. If you can't treat him right, then don't treat him as anything. Just get lost. Mind your own business. They're not hurting you. Get lost. And of course, there's racism within the MSM. If you remember Don Lemon saying white men are terrorists, which is hilarious because he's literally married to a white man, right? It's a married gay couple, and one of them is white. You literally, by logic, just called your spouse a terrorist, Don. Do you not see like the logical problem with that? Oh, I'm sure he loved when he heard that coming out of your mouth. I'm sure he loved that. Oh man, no, no. If it were me, he'd be sleeping on the couch for like a month. Like I'm serious. Like that shit's just stupid. That's just sort of the casual racism that permeates and perpetuates within the mainstream media. And the good news is, it's killing them. People like me get angry when we hear that shit because it just serves to remind us of the things done to us in the past, and it makes us angry. And on one hand, I could be like, get revenge on CNN for opening an old wound. Or I could just let MSM kill itself. I could just let the MSM and CNN and MSNBC kill itself. Which is precisely what I'm going to do. This is Sun Tzu's most famous quote. Well, at least most famous quote as far as I know, which is, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And trust me, they have made themselves the enemy of whites in America. You have to understand, your average white person is nothing more than just Joe Schmo 9 to 5, working to feed his kids. He's too busy working his ass off to hurt you. So why the hell are you trying to hurt him? Just because he has the same skin color as an evil villain from forever ago? You're attacking the ordinary working man, which makes up the majority of the population. You're not hurting him, you're hurting yourself. But of course, never interrupt an enemy when they're making a mistake. That's the beauty of it. This is why I'm never going to try to talk CNN out of its rhetoric. No, I'm just going to let CNN die. I'm going to let CNN die. Because that's how I operate. You will know my wrath by my cold indifference. I do believe in revenge, but this is my idea of revenge. The idea that you let the person kill themselves and you do nothing to stop it. You just give them your cold indifference, you let them go, and see what happens. And at the end of the day, you can have a good laugh and be like, ha ha ha, good job, bastard. Thank you. I'll get on so much better without you. At the end of the day, the mainstream media is destroying itself through anti-white rhetoric. Because yes, even some racial minorities hate hearing that crap. Right? They have white family members sometimes, white neighbors, people they care about, and they're hearing people bad mouthing them constantly, albeit indirectly. That's an upsetting thing. They hate you too. We all do. When you start espousing the anti-white rhetoric in mainstream media, bitch, you're the most unpopular man alive. People hate hearing that shit. It's really only like the far left who loves it, and for them it's like pornography. They're practically masturbating to it. Oh yeah, white people are so evil. And then they spooge all over the place. Sperm must be racist because it's white. But yeah, they'll be gone long enough. They'll be gone pretty soon. I remember reading just recently that CNN's ratings actually fell by 80%. You know, I looked at a couple articles showing that MSNBC's ratings fell by just a bit, but they remain the second most viewed network. Don't kid yourself. CNN may eventually fall apart because of their rhetoric, but MSNBC will still be around for a little while longer, and then they'll go next. It'll be a death of these people, but it'll be a slow death. I say just be patient. Just be patient and let it happen. Follow Sun Tzu's advice and never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. You let them die. Just let them fall apart with their bullshit. Like, I know it sucks to hear that shit talking about, white people are evil, evil, evil. But you know what? Just be patient. They don't hurt anybody but themselves when they do that shit. Don't watch it. Change the channel. They lose ratings that way. You want to fight CNN? Don't watch. Change the channel. They'll disappear before long. In fact, they just recently lost the airport deal where they would be played in all airports, where the channel would be set to airports. They'd be aired in packages on the airports. They lost that. So they're really struggling to survive, and they're probably looking around clueless like, why am I losing ratings? What's going on? Bitch, it's because you're toxic. And nobody likes toxic. Nobody likes toxic. Certainly not me. Anyway, with that being said, there will be a link in the description to my books down below. Please buy, download, and read them as always. Tschüss. Peace.